Hello, this is Michael Nikula. Welcome to the Dash Show. Today's topic, it's a heavy one, is taxation. Taxation seems to be a hot button issue in the light of the recent development with Occupy Canada, Occupy everything all over the world. People seem to be unhappy with the fact that the tax systems are favoring the rich over the poor, and they increase the gap between rich and poor and breed more poverty and all the social issues that are associated with it. So today we're going to talk about ways to improve taxation. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Dash Show. My name is Nick Savage. We have an excellent panel to talk to you about taxation. We have our two experts, Andrew and Kapil, and our two questioners, the lovely Andrea and the even lovelier Kevin. Kevin, why don't you get us started?
Hey guys, I guess the first question I'd like to ask is about it's a two-part question about the elusive $100 bill. Does it exist, or is it something that rich people just made up to mess with me? If it does in fact exist, why don't I have any? So in essence, why am I so broke as a Canadian?
Are you a stand-up comic?
I am.
Well, that's why.
So there are many reasons why there are many poor people in this country. Is the fact that the establishment is actually set up against you. We have too much taxation in this country. To get your taxes done, it costs an arm and a leg to do it. Obviously, wages are not up to par. But there are also people believe the answer to this is government intervention. But of course, from a libertarian point of view, it's quite the opposite. There is no free market economy. There is capitalism, but we have what we call, what Mussolini called as corporatism, or crony capitalism. So you yourself, you don't have $100 bills because all the bankers on Wall Street, or in our case, Bay Street, they have the $100 bills. Mark Carney, he's printing left, right, and center, and they have the $100 bills. And eventually, by the time you get a $100 bill, that $100 bill will be worth $50, $40, and we'll be able to buy you much groceries anymore. I mean, look at nowadays. We try to buy groceries for $100, and what can you actually get for $100 these days?
You're saying right, like, because most of the spending goes into the form of taxes and the HST you pay on the bills, whether in the form of services. So at the end of the day, at the end of the year, you get something around $60 or $50. So government is taking around like $40, and the value of the services you are getting in return is not at par. So the spending and the tax system has to be equalated. It has not to be like spending, we are charging more from the low income taxpayers. The high income taxpayer has to contribute more to the economy rather than the low class income taxpayers.
Well, the $100 bill might be worth less, but at the same time, it's probably the one most likely to be covered with cocaine, so that's pretty sweet, right?
But also, to get back to the point, I completely agree that we have too much taxation and we should lower taxes. But you also have to make the decision. You have to make the sacrifice. Hey, do I want less public services, or do I want that $100 in my pocket for me to make that decision? So you could complain about not having enough $100 in bills, but it's up to you, the individual, to elect officials, or even not even elected officials, because what do they really do these days? So you have to force your municipal, provincial, and federal government to have less public programs so you can have more dollars in your pockets. Because that's what taxation does. It steals from one individual to give to another individual to have these public services, whether it's welfare or childcare or programs along those lines that the municipal government offers.
Well, if public services are important to me, let's say that if my house catches on fire, I don't want to have to put it out by myself because I probably wouldn't do a very good job. I want professionals to do it, but I also don't want to have to pay a bill after the fire department comes to my home. So I want a social service in order to cover that. My taxes, as someone who doesn't really make very much, compared to someone who is a corporate owner, right? who is able to kind of skirt around a lot of things and get through tax loopholes, and in essence, in some cases, pay less, at least percentage-wise, than someone like me. Is there any better idea or any way to fix that?
I think it's now referred to as the Warren Buffett effect. The Warren Buffett effect.
Okay, so two-part answer here. First of all, in a free libertarian society because I'm a libertarian, I advocate a free market, laissez-faire society. So in terms of, if I want to get rid of the income tax system completely. So in your case, if your house gets burned down, let's say, what would be paid for that is through the justice system. If say someone breaks the law, they go to court, they pay a heavy fine, they go to prison. They pay, let's say, $5,000. And I'm pretty sure we all can agree that there's going to be 0% crime. I mean, that's not going to happen. So you'll always have criminals. They're the ones that are going to pay for your house burning down, or they're the ones that are going to pay for police services. So in that instance, that is done. The second part relates to my first answer, where I want to get rid of the income tax system completely. So corporations, they won't have any loopholes to go through, because they're going to have the exact same system as you, where you can decide what you want to do with your money. If your house burns down, get an insurance policy. If you have a health crisis, get a health savings account, which some we don't have in this country. But if there was a free market system, that would be implemented by the banks. So you'd have that system. You have savings, you have friends, family, and to a certain extent churches. But again, the way everything is priced these days, churches won't be able to afford it. They've gone on record by saying, we would give hospital care, we would give medical care, but every way inflation is these days, it's not going to happen.
So even Jesus is broke? That sucks, God. Son of God, he thought he could get a couple bills in him, but anyways.
Well, it would be great to have income tax totally eradicated, but reality is that probably won't happen.
Yeah, of course not. That will happen.
So wouldn't it just make more sense to have a much simpler way to do income taxes, or to have some kind of like you were saying, if the more money you make, you can find ways around things, save some money, don't have to pay any taxes, the Warren Buffett effect, as he was saying. But then the lower income are paying more. So wouldn't it just make more sense to make it simpler and have things balanced, where everybody's paying a certain percentage of their income regardless of what that income is? So then the people who are making less money, they would obviously then be paying less. People who are making more would be paying more. I mean, that seems like a very logical solution, but obviously it's not logical to everybody else in the world, because it's not happening.
By people making less money, I need to clarify again, she means us.
Yes.
Big shit.
Yeah.
Your
either one of you, yeah.
Your concern is right, like the people who are earning less, they are paying like more in comparison to the people who are earning more. Like in the case of a person who is earning like around $10.25 minimum wages, and approximately around 20% of their deductions get from their paycheck. So they are getting like $80 in a $100 bill. So what I mean to say here, their deduction should be reduced from 20%, like 15% is their tax, and 5% is their CPP and their employment insurance contribution. That CPP and EI has to be there, 5%, but income tax has to be lowered to around like 5% or 6%. It will result in like having a more money in the form of pay, and you don't have to wait for a year to get all your refunds, which is like little harsh on the low income family, because they earn like around $20,000. They have to pay the groceries and other kind of stuff. So it's very harsh on them. So what I mean to say here, increase the slab of the like from the 29% of the highest tax rate which we are charging on the personal, to make it like to around 35%. So charge more from the rich people, or 40% might be. So it will result in like getting more money in the form of taxes rather than the lower people. And you can also increase the bracket of like the $10,382, the income tax exemption, to little like around 17 or 18,000. So people like at least can get more savings and can invest the money.
Well, that would be handy, because like I don't even make minimum wage. I get paid in compliments, and they're very few.
Yeah, most of the say like if you go around, like the public services mostly used by the low class people, so they have to do something so they can have more money, they can spend their money in a better way, and like it can result in the welfare of the low class people too.
So maybe we should make like enforce social systems for rich people? Like you have to go down to a government building to buy a yacht or a poodle or something, that sort of thing?
Like anything on like relating to like yeah.
You have to force them to pay a tax on it, let's say. Would that work?
Basically, in this case, like only the corporates are providing that, and the government is already disallowing the expenditures. But that disallowance of the expenditure doesn't make sense because they are already using the service. So it's a different thing. But we want to say like for a low class or like a middle class, they should do something more by reducing the tax rates and giving more incentives, more refunds, like they are giving it right now, but it's the same for everybody. So they can give more incentive in that form.
Okay. If I may interject to that, that language the host just used where he says you should force people to pay a tax, that kind of language is absolutely dangerous to use in a supposed free society. People talk about voluntary taxation. There is no such thing as voluntary taxation. You are forced to pay it, and that is force. If you don't pay it, you go to jail. But also, as you pointed out, everyone could agree that the tax system is complicated, correct? Filling out taxes. But if it wasn't complicated, he wouldn't exist. His accounting position wouldn't exist. So there's so much accounting firms, there's so much influence in the tax policy to make it difficult. So he has work. So you have all these major accounting firms or private firms. So he should be thankful that we have a complicated tax system.
It's not about complicated. There are certain reforms, like we have to nourish our industry in other sectors too. Like we have to increase our spending in research and expenditure, like in industry, like US is spending too much money and they're getting incentives also, the companies who are spending. It increase our rapidly increase our technology, and so we have to spend our money and have a more like a tax system should be equivalent in all the sectors. The government has a far much like a similar kind of tax rates.
So are you advocating subsidies then for companies?
Yeah.
How's that free market? How's that a proper economy? You're just choosing then which companies to abide by or which companies to invest in. When people say, because that means your tax money is then going, you don't have a choice. You have a choice of how the public spends the money because your elected officials are the one choosing how to spend your money, how to invest in a company. That's in my opinion, subsidies never work. They never will work. The human mind, the human spirit, free enterprise, they can do a much better job in technology than the government can.
Okay, so I mean, I've seen a lot of advertisements lately from companies that say they can help me negotiate my taxes. I don't know what that's all about, but it sounds awesome. Can you guys help me cheat on my taxes? And if so, how?
That is totally unfair. People are doing it's cheating on taxes, like somebody has not paid the taxes when the CRA audits them. Their tax results in they have somebody liability is they have paid a tax around $200,000 in the past, but when the CRA audits them, it results in the increase in the liability from $200,000 to $1 million tax. So they have paid $800,000 short. So the government levies penalty. The government charges there is a criminal liability too, because it's a real serious offense. Anybody does that. So there are lawyers who helps those kind of people to settle their cases by having a direct contact with the CRA. They use their prior influence and the experience they have with the CRA. So that's totally unfair, and that practice should be restricted. There should be no, the service should be totally be disallowed. In case of the whole tax should be paid by those kind of tax evaders, and it should be wholly abolished.
Before I provide my answer, I want to ask you a question actually.
Yeah.
If someone who makes minimum wage or barely minimum wage and they cheat on their taxes, do you think that's wrong? Do you think that's not right? Do you think they should also pay taxes?
But in case of a person who owns employment income, they get the paycheck automatically after deducting all the deduction. So they are already paying the minimum tax rate. So there's no point of any person cheating on that. Cheating comes from the high class income taxpayers.
But if they had the opportunity to cheat on their taxes, would you think that's wrong? Do you think that's right or wrong?
No, it's totally wrong because it doesn't have any opportunity to steal the taxes.
The whole tax system has become corrupt. It's become ridiculous where people have to. There was a study that came out back in 2009 by Sage Research. It was a study conducted for the Canada Revenue Agency. It cost $168,000 taxpayer money. And they asked business owners whether it's right or wrong to, or no, it's a mixture of business and regular people. And they asked, do you think it's wrong or right to tax evade? And in this, they provided responses by saying how some restaurant owners, for example, they have to have a cash register in the back. Just to hide income from the government. You have waiters who don't tax their tips because they're making such small amounts of money. So I want to legalize what these people are doing. I want to legalize people who evade taxes. I mean, it's their money that they're trying to hide from. It's the fruit of their labor they're trying to hide from. How is that right? I mean, if you work really hard yourself, why should you hide your money? Why do you have to do that? But of course, you can't have tax evasion, or you can't cut income tax, or you can't get rid of it without addressing the spending problem we have in this country. At all three levels of government, we all have deficits, we all have debt, especially the Canadian government. The federal government has nearly a trillion, so about $600 billion national debt. So of course, you can't talk about cutting tax rates, or eliminating income tax, or limiting the sales tax, without addressing what should the role of government ought to be.
Well, that was excellent, guys. This has been a fantastic panel. I would like to thank Andrew Moran, who you can find on his website, as well as Kapil Mahajan, who you can find on LinkedIn, as well as our fantastic questioners, Andrea Butler and Kevin Burke. For The Dash Show, this is Nick Savage. Thank you very much. Taxes. While everybody hates them, it is the beautiful bond as a society that keeps us paying them. You see, society is like a chain. It's only as strong as its weakest link, and our taxes go to strengthen those links. They also go to pay to keep those weaker links from breaking into our houses and stealing stuff. Taxes are a great equalizer, since we all have to pay them. However, it's a system that manages an incredibly unequal populace, both in financial status and good looks. For this reason, Canada and other countries use a progressive tax system, one in which you pay a percentage of your salary based on your annual income. However, the tricky thing with a system like this is figuring out who pays what. Generally, the political ideal seems to be somewhere between not making the rich pay too much because then they get pissy and stop job creating, and making the poor pay too much because then them and their children starve to death. One area of need in which safety net societies are woefully negligent is sexual contact. The ugly, awkward, and boring of society are weakening the social chain with their terrible productivity and general unhappiness. For this reason, government should create programs where good-looking men and women would service government-designated people in need once or twice a year. What's in it for the good-looking people? A non-refundable sex tax credit. Think how many middle-class families with good-looking people in them would benefit from an STC in these hard economic times. I mean, obviously the size of your credit would depend on how far you were willing to go for the program. Myself, purely speaking, of course, I know that I would be more productive and far happier if I was government guaranteed to get laid every 6 months. That's tax reform I can get behind. I'm Nick Savage for The Dash Show.
That was a very good discussion. You want to know my opinion? My opinion is that the tax system is too complicated and has too many loopholes, and people who know how to play with those rules, they can get tax advantage. Usually they're not the poor people, it's the rich people who play with it. There's many rich people, like Warren Buffett famously said that he pays less tax than his secretary. And that goes to show you how much room for improvement, let's say, it's in the taxation system. You don't have to agree with me. If you have comments or you want to go and vote, go on the website www.onlineparty.ca. Thank you for watching the show.